So welcome to Sage 200 Best Practices, and we'll be going through a number of modules, a number of options, and we'll be following the handouts that hopefully you've either got or you'll be downloading now and you can print out. Okie dokie. So the first part of the session really is what you should do to keep your data in good order. So I'll be going through each of the modules and making some recommendations of some processes that you can follow just to ensure that the data is in fact true, it reflects the true position of the business at this point in time, and also that it's in good working order. Now, the first thing we're going to be looking at is the user login status. Within Accounting System Manager, we have system utilities. And on a regular basis, we recommend that you just go into the user login status just to ensure that you don't have any disconnected logins. If you do have any, you can just highlight them, select the log off button, and say yes, you wish to disconnect log them out of the system. This needs to be done on a regular basis. If it happens, if you going in on a weekly basis, for example, and the same users are coming up with disconnected logins, you need to monitor that. You need to ensure that there's nothing wrong with the hardware, the cabling within the system for that particular user. Now, also we have in System Utilities balance ledgers. It's split into two halves. We have financials and we have commercials. Again, we always recommend, certainly as part of your month-end processing, that you run the balance ledgers. For those of you on 2016 and above, it's actually called Verify Data. And all that will do is just ensure the integrity of the data. So, for example, if I go into financials, I can select all accounts. And if I just run that, what that's going to do is ensure that all the transactions on my customer accounts agrees to the balance on that particular account. This is the screen that will be displayed. This is the ideal scenario where you have total errors is 0, errors that are fixable are 0. If you had a number of errors, so say it said total errors was 10, errors fixable is 10, it's not a problem at all. You would just rerun the utility, but this time you would be selecting validate report and correct anomalies, and Sage will fix those errors automatically. If there was a discrepancy between the number of errors and the errors that are fixable, then run this utility again running validate report and correct anomalies. So what you would have then would be showing total errors, say, would be 10, errors fixable would be 0, and you would then call us and we would log in and look at the data and work out what the problem is. You run that for financials for each of the modules that are available: sales ledger, purchase, nominal, and cash book. And also within the commercials option, you can run that individually for the sales order processing, purchase order processing, or stock control. But if you just select stock control, it will automatically select the other two modules and it will validate the data in all those modules at the same time. So what this is doing is processing sales orders, and it's ensuring that the quantity that's allocated agrees to what's allocated within stock control. It's also going to do the same for our purchase orders, and it's going to look at stock control, and it's going to validate to our depots to ensure that the quantities held in the depots agrees to the total quantity in stock. Now, this is a good example where we got errors. We have a number of errors, but they're all fixable. So by running that utility again, this time I want to correct the anomalies, select stock control and say OK. It will run through the data, but this time it will fix those errors that it's found, so that the ideal scenario will come up in just a moment where the number of errors agrees to the errors that have been fixed. And you can see here that it's telling us what the error is as well. So the total values don't match the values of the order return lines. Okay, now in each of the modules, there are a number of processes that we recommend in order to maintain the integrity of your data. So if I go to sales orders and have a look at our sales order list, review your sales orders on a regular basis. We recommend that you just review any allocations that are required, any allocated but not dispatched orders, and I suppose most importantly, any dispatched orders that have not been invoiced. There are a number of reports available as standard. Within sales order processing reports, we have processing, and we would run within order lines any of those three report, and they'll report on those scenarios that I gave you. So for example, if I run my sales orders dispatched not invoiced for absolutely everything, here we can see that I've got one order that's actually been dispatched, but I haven't yet invoiced that particular order. So I can go into my print invoices and ensure I'm up to date with my invoicing and sales order processing. It's also worthwhile just running through the sales orders and ensuring that those orders are still genuine and still valid. If we pop in a filter for our live orders, so I'm going to create a new filter called live orders, and I'm going to create it where the status is equal to, and I want to just look at my live orders. So on a regular basis, I can just run through those live orders and just determine that they are still valid, and I don't need to cancel any or make any amendments to them. Now, within purchase order processing, we recommend a very similar kind of housekeeping process. So if I go to my purchase order processing and my purchase order list, okay, we would again recommend that on a regular basis, you go to your reports, your processing, and the order lines reports, and just confirm that any receipts, order receipts have been entered. And I suppose quite importantly, that you've received all the invoices from your suppliers, because until that receipt has been received, you're going to have an imbalance really, or a discrepancy between the stock valuation within your stock costings for the nominal ledger and also your cost of sales. There's also a utility within purchase order processing maintenance, the standard cost variances. Now again, this needs to be run certainly on a monthly basis. Okay, and it will just post the difference between your standard cost and your purchase order prices through to the nominal ledger. So you've got that balanced book feature within stock control and the nominal ledger. So if you order something for £10, but the standard cost is £12, it will post a £2 difference to the nominal ledger when you run this option. I'll be covering a little bit more about standard costs later on this morning as well. Okay, now within stock control, there are a number of options that we would recommend. We recommend that you regularly check, do a stock valuation on your high value or high quantity items, just to check the validity of those items. We also recommend that you review your standard cost. So I've created a filter already for standard cost items, and we can see here what our standard cost is for those items. Now we've got quite a few items, but actually we've got a zero standard cost. So straight away, that's a warning light. You need to have a standard cost in there, otherwise all your stock movements will be valued at a zero value. Even those that do have a value, it still needs to be sort of reviewed on a regular basis. This standard cost may have been created years ago when we first set up the system, but things change and you might want to review that. It might be higher or less than you're currently recording those items at. Now, there is a process to follow, and again, I'll go in a little more detail a little later on this morning, but if I just update the standard cost without doing some prerequisite sort of requirements, you're going to cause an imbalance again between the stock control and the nominal ledger, but I am covering that a little later on this morning. For your items as well, if I go to amend details, you have this allow sales order flag, and we recommend that you remove this flag for any items that are discontinued. It just means that when people are entering sales orders, they're not going to be sort of bogged down by discontinued items. And also you can set items as inactive. So again, any obsolete items can become inactive. So again, it just stops users becoming sort of bogged down and inundated with data that's really not relevant. It's also very important that your nominal codes are set up accurately for your stock items. Now within our stock utilities, there is an import and export routine, which if I export my stock records, will actually show me what nominal code is assigned to my stock items, and that really needs to be reviewed. So I'm just going to save that to my desktop for now, and I'm going to call it that webinar and save that. Okie dokie. So if I just minimize that, go and find my webinar. Got too many things on my desktop. Where's my webinar? You're shouting at me, you can see it and I can't. There it is at the top there. Right, let's open up that. Okay, and you can see it's listed all my stock items, but it's also listed all of my asset nominal code, revenue nominal code, accruals, and issues. Now, if I just create a filter on there, what I need to check, are there any items that are not being posted to the balance sheet? And here I can see that nearly all of them are going to the balance sheet. There's just a couple that are going to my P&L. So what I'm going to do is just analyze those. And I can see that all of these items are in the product group PROM. And if I go back into Sage and just look at that product group, just edit that. It's actually a miscellaneous type product group, so that's fine. They're posting to the right nominal code. But it's really useful utility to be aware of that you can in fact export all of that data through to Excel and then just ensure the integrity of the nominal postings for those stock items. Also within stock control, if I go to my settings, on stock control settings, okay, we have write-off categories, and those write-off categories should all be posting to a P&L account. So again, it's really worthwhile just going back to your desks after this webinar, just going to the write-off categories and ensuring that they're writing off to a P&L account and not to the asset of the stock. Otherwise, again, that's going to cause discrepancies between stock control and the nominal ledger. Okay, so within the price book, for those of you using price book, we have a utility and it's validate the price book. Now, if I run that, there are two options available to us. We can validate that discount amounts for items are not greater than their selling prices. And we can also validate the profit margins are above a minimum level. So if we want to ensure that we're making a minimum of 50% profit, okay, we can just enter the value, validate either a single stock item, a single product group, or everything. And Sage is now reading through all of our stock items, looking at our selling prices and our buying prices, and it's just going to report on those where we don't meet that 50% margin. Now you can see here it's showing all the selling price bands for all the items. If there's a 0, it does show those as well, so they're not so relevant. But here you can see we've got an example where we're selling something for £2.10 and we're actually, was it the wrong way around, and actually sort of buying it at £1.55. So we're only making a 34% margin on that particular item. So we might want to review our selling prices. Okay, for those of you that are using project accounting, I just go to my project accounting lists. Again, it's really worthwhile on a periodic basis just looking at your projects and ensuring that they're at the correct project status. That status is really important for two reasons. One, it's you determine what postings can be made for your projects at different statuses, whether you can enter costs, whether you can enter revenue, whether you can archive or delete them. But also when it comes to your reporting and your analysis, you invariably just want to be reporting on any of your open or your live projects at any one point in time. So you need to make sure that those that are completed are at the right status. So they're then excluded from your figures or excluded from the reports that you want to be running on a regular basis. Now in the notes, I have actually added 2 more sections. One's to do with monthly reconciliation and another to do with your yearly processing. In November, we will actually be doing a month-end webinar, and I'll be going into a lot more detail on the monthly reconciliation at that webinar. And in December, we'll be running our year-end webinar. And again, I'll be going into a lot more detail with regard to your yearly processing at that particular webinar as well. But I've added them to these notes because they're important to be aware of, and they're important to put on your checklist when it comes to validating your data. I've also added a general housekeeping section. It's difficult for me to sort of demonstrate this to you, but it's very important that you ensure that any wireless connection is disabled on all workstations. Sage do not support a wireless connection, so you have to have a proper cable. So please go around ensuring that all your PCs are not accessing Sage via a wireless connection. It's also important to ensure that all your workstations have a consistent data speed of 1 gigabyte or more. You need to ensure that your data is being backed up every night, and don't just leave it to chance. Don't just assume it's working. Periodically try to restore your last night's backup to your training data set, just for peace of mind that you know that that data is being backed up and it's being backed up correctly. I've also added a section with regard to archiving and deleting of transactions. Again, it's just a way of keeping your data tidy so that you've got just the visibility of the data you're wanting to focus on. I've split that section into 2 halves, the financials and the commercials. So within the financials, for example, within the sales ledger, period end routines, there's an account maintenance utility, which will allow you to archive transactions for any period of time. That's also available within the purchase ledger. And then you also have in your utilities for those modules, file maintenance, the purge transactions, which will allow you to delete transactions completely from the archive file. But that's only going to be run when you've been using Sage for quite a number of years, and you're happy to sort of like remove those transactions completely. Now, again, the archiving and deleting of transactions will be covered in detail in the December year-end webinar. So I'm just going to sort of, I've brought that to your attention, but the detail will be I'll be going through in December. What I really want to focus on is the very last page of the handouts, which is what not to do within Sage. Now, everything that I've listed here, Sage will allow you to do. So unless you're aware of it, you could quite easily go into any of these options and do this, but it will cause data corruption and data discrepancies. So I'm going to go through each of those in some detail. So first of all, I'm going to go back into stock control. And I'm just going to highlight an item and amend the details. Within the locations, okay, we have bin numbers, and it's actually possible to rename a bin. However, we ask you, please do not do that. We have had issues before, especially if you're using batch numbers and serial numbers, where some programs access the bin via the bin name, and other modules or other sort of programs within Sage access that via its ID within the SQL database, and it can cause discrepancies between your serial numbers, your batch numbers, the location, the quantities you've got allocated. So please, although Sage will allow you to rename a bin, we ask you not to do so. It's also possible, okay, within the system to use any special characters. So by that I mean like your commas, your semicolon, colon, all the usual funny sort of characters that are available on a standard keyboard. However, again, we ask you not to use those characters, and I have provided a list of what characters not to use. You can carry on oblivious to the fact that there may be an issue, but the issues that we find is if you try to export data to Excel or to CSV, then those special characters can cause a data corruption at that point in time, because Excel recognizes those as field breaks. So again, although Sage will allow you to enter those in the text field throughout the system, not just within stock control, we ask that you try not to use them as far as possible. Also, please can we ask that you don't upgrade your operating system, Microsoft Office, or any other system software without checking with us that it's compatible with your version of Sage 200. If you just go ahead and upgrade client PCs with the latest version of Microsoft Office or the Microsoft operating systems, it can cause an incompatibility, and it can even stop Sage working at all. You just can't log in, or the screen looks all corrupt and sort of out of sync. So please, please, please check with us before you do any upgrades of your system. Now, it's also possible within SQL itself to actually amend any of the data. However, if you were to do that, if you find out that you've updated the data through SQL directly, it does invalidate your support contract, and it can indeed cause data corruption. Now, for example, within Sage itself as standard, if I just minimize that, sorry. If I go to, let's just, get rid of this. I go down to my stock code, CA base single beach, that one there. If I go to amend the details, okay, it's not possible, okay, to change the stock item code. Okay, Sage will not allow you to do that. However, if I just close this, through SQL itself, I could change the item code to anything I want it to be. I now go back into Sage and refresh my list. I now have stock code ABC11111. If I go, however, to view my sales orders, okay, and let's have a little look at that, you can see that on the sales order, it's still maintained the original item code. It doesn't update that. It's all linked via an ID and not via the code. So if you're trying to report on stock item ABC11111, you're not going to find any sales orders, you're not going to find any purchase orders, and if you start processing, and again, especially batch number, serial numbers, it's all linked through IDs, and it will cause data corruption, which will be impossible for us to find out what's been changed, who changed it, when it was changed, and how much of that data corruption has been fed through the system. So please do not change any data through SQL. I'll just pop that back where it was so I don't get tripped up by that myself. Okay, and I'm back into Sage. Okay, now within the nominal ledger, if I go to my nominal list, all our nominal codes are identified with a report category code, and it's a report category code that determines if a code is a profit and loss or a balance sheet account. So before I change anything, I'm just going to run our report, and I'm going to run my profit and loss for the current period, and it's showing me a profit, get down to the end, of 7 million. If I run my balance sheet to the same period, okay, again, that is showing me my current period profit for 7 million, and my balance sheet balances accordingly. Let's just amend our freehold property, which is currently a balance sheet account, and I'm just going to pop that and change that to a profit and loss account. Okay, now Sage has let me do this. It's not giving me any warnings. I can change that to whatever I want it to be. And if I just refresh my list, you can see that report category has now changed. Let's run my profit and loss again for the same period. Okay, and that has given me my same P&L. Okay, even though there's a balance on that freehold property account, the P&L report is picking up all P&L transactions for a specific date range. Let me now run my balance sheet for the same period, and you can see now that my profit for the period doesn't agree to my profit and loss report, because my balance sheet is just picking up the balances on my profit and loss accounts, which includes that freehold property, even those transactions were posted back in 2014 or whatever date they were entered. So immediately I've got a discrepancy between my balance sheet and my profit and loss report because I've just changed the report category type within the nominal account. So please do not change that report category between balance sheet or P&L as soon as you have any transactions posted to those accounts. There's also the ability, okay, now I haven't got very many waiting postings, but I'll try to show you this. When you select Update Waiting Postings from the current waiting postings list, there is a cancel button available to you as it's processing. So if I click on Update Waiting Postings and I say OK, is it going to show me? Because it might be too quick. I haven't got very many transactions there. No, it didn't show me. If there's a lot of postings that are waiting, there's a scroll bar that will actually go through, and you can cancel the update waiting postings. But again, please, we're asking you, do not do that. We have come across issues in the past where it has actually created duplicate URM postings at that point in time when it tries to cancel. So please be aware that as soon as you select update waiting postings, that you just let it continue processing and finish that process. Now, again, if I go back to my nominal list and I go down to my debtors control, okay, my debtors control is a control account, and we really do not want to be posting manual journals to that account. If I were to post, let's first of all look at my sales ledger, and if I look at my age debtors report, I can do it retrospectively for the current period that I'm in, which is all the way back in October 2015, we can see that we have 1759197 balance on the sales ledger. If I view that account, we can see I've got 1759197 on my sales ledger, on my nominal ledger rather. So my nominal ledger agrees to the sales ledger. As soon as I were to make a posting directly into that account, test debtors, 31st to the 10th. Okay, and I'm going to debit that with 257 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There. If I post that, go back into my waiting postings. Right. And update those. Okie dokes. I'll go back to my nominal list. Okay, so if I now go to my account inquiry, okay, the balance on my debtors control account in the nominal has been updated, but of course nothing has been posted through to the sales ledger. So I will still have the original balance on my sales ledger, and now that will not agree to my nominal. So I have created an imbalance between my nominal ledger and my sales ledger by entering that transaction. Now it is possible to actually stop that happening. There is an option here to allow manual journal entries, and for your control accounts, we recommend you untick that so nobody can make that mistake. You can't post a manual journal to those control accounts because we've actually switched that option off. Now it's also possible, okay, so if within the cash book, a common mistake we find is if people want to transfer money, maybe between the main bank account and the petty cash, that what they do is they actually do a payment, non-vatable payment, out of the main bank account. Okay, so put a check number in there, give it a date. And what they do is they say they're making the payment to their petty cash account via the nominal ledger. So they would just select, if I could just find bank petty cash, £100. So I'm not going to print a check. Okay, so what that means is that our main bank account, that's fine. We've done the cash book transaction and the payment has come out of the bank account. However, in the cash book, we haven't affected the petty cash book account. So we're now going to have an imbalance between our petty cash account and the nominal ledger. In that scenario, if you want to transfer money between cash book accounts within the cash book and other transactions, there is the inter-account transfer, which you select the bank account that you're making the payment from. You select the bank account that's receiving the money, and you literally just pop in the details using that functionality. And what that will do is update both the nominal ledger and the cash book accounts with that transaction. And so it'll keep your cash books in balance with the nominal ledger. Another option that is available within all of the modules, okay, if we go to just transactions in the sales ledger, we have this option to delete transactions. So before I do that, let's have a little look, okay, at what we've got. So we've got quality counts, we've got a balance there of £28,000. If I go to delete transactions from a single account, quality counts, I'm just going to delete that. It does tell me, am I sure? And I'm going to say, yes, I'm sure. So I'm going to run that utility. And it's literally just going to delete all the transactions. What it's not going to do is make a nominal posting for that deletion. I refresh my list. I've now got a zero balance on my quality count sales ledger account. However, my nominal ledger hasn't changed. And I've got no record of that particular process taking place. Even though there was a balance on that account, it's deleted those unallocated, unpaid transactions. It's there for a reason. It is there really for as business partners. You know, when we're setting up new sites, what you can do is set up a company, put all your parameters in, run through some test transactions so users are happy. Then we can run delete transactions so we know we've got the right settings, but there's no balances on all the accounts. But I always recommend that we actually amend the menus and take those delete transactions off people's menus so they can't run it by mistake. Now, what I mentioned earlier on was within stock control. Okay, we can set up standard cost items. So if I go to my stock list, okay, we have here an item, our standard test standard cost item list. Sorry, I can't get the words out. Our test standard costed item. We have a quantity of 1 and we have a standard cost of £10. If I just amend that account just to show you that the associated nominal code for that is 1313103. I thought it was 13104. I've changed it. Okie dokes. If I go to my nominal ledger, my nominal list, 3104. Yes, I thought so. I changed it and I didn't change the posting. Okie dokes. Let me see if there's anything on there. No. Okay. So 13103, transaction inquiry. Okie dokie. 31st of the 10th, 2015. Okay, we have there our £10 debit that went in for that particular item when I added the stock into that item. However, if I were to just go back to my stock list and I amend that stock item and I say, well, actually, it's no longer valued at £10, it is now valued at £12. And just save that. What's happened is if I refresh my list, that item is now valued at £12. If I go to my reports and I go to my valuation, just for that particular item, okay, we can see there a £12 value on our stock valuation report. However, our nominal ledger hasn't been updated at all. There is nothing to tell Sage that the nominal needs to be updated. So if I go back into that account, you can see no posting has been made. We still have the original £10 value in the nominal ledger. So I've got a discrepancy now between my stock valuation and my nominal ledger. What you need to do before you update any of your stock items is run the stock valuation report for those items. So you have the value that's held within the nominal ledger. You would then update the standard cost on those stock items, and then you would rerun the stock valuation report for your standard costed items, and they would do a manual journal between the stock control account and any other P&L account. It's usually the cost of sales posting, but it's a manual journal that you need to do to record the difference between the original standard cost and the revised standard cost posting. There are a couple of other items that I've mentioned about what not to do. We recommend that when you go home at night, you don't leave Sage logged in, that you actually close Sage down, because obviously we're hoping that you're backing up your data on a regular basis. And we also suggest that you don't leave your PC switched on overnight. But if you do, when you come in the morning, again, we recommend that you just reset your PC just so that it can account for any updates that may be valid at that point in time as well. And then the final one, which is a bit of a repeat, but it's so important, is please do not assume that your data is being backed up accurately. Please check periodically, just find your last night's backup, restore it to your training company, and just check the integrity of that data. We really have had instances where people have assumed that one, backups are taking place, and secondly, that they are working as you would expect, and it's caused absolute chaos. So I'm going to leave you on that note, and I hope you can all go now, find last night's backup, and do a test restore of your data. So thank you for your time. I hope that's been helpful. As I say, some of the things on the list from the handout we will be covering in future webinars, but you've got a really good list there, things to check, and hopefully you can go through that and just ensure that everything is good with your Sage 200 data. So thank you for that, and I hope we'll see you again at the next session at the end of September.